Duke Nukem Megaton Edition has just arrived on the PlayStation 3 and PS Vita, so I thought it might be a good time to delve into the blonde-haired alien-killing machine's first proper venture into handheld gaming. Back in 1999, it was largely unthinkable that you could have Duke Nukem 3D running on a system that fitted into the palm of your hand. A reasonably accurate version of it anyway. Instead, you had to be a little bit creative when bringing the series onto a portable system, and in no case is this more ably demonstrated than in Duke Nukem on the Game Boy Color. This is a game that goes all the way back to Duke's roots, and that's what makes it worthy of inspection. As you may know, Duke Nukem didn't start off spraying one-liners and cursing aliens for shooting up his ride, but instead begun on a 2D plane. Apogee Software and 3D Realms released the original entry in the series in 1991 for the PC, and a sequel arrived 2 years later. They're serviceable platformers, but the series got its first real big break with Duke Nukem 3D, which was launched in 1996. So when Taurus Games was handed the reins to create this Game Boy Color iteration, it wisely decided to turn back time and make it a 2D platformer. Still, it's not something that has ever got much attention. Even the Duke Nukem Wikipedia page doesn't really acknowledge its existence as a separate entry in the series. But is it a worthy successor to those dusty old shareware cult classics? Or is it a title that's best forgotten? Let's find out. It opens with an admirably bleepy rendition of the game's main theme, and a pretty impressive introductory cutscene. There's none of Duke's typically bawdy language here, but it's still enjoyable enough. There's genuinely some top-notch animation to marvel at, and there's a welcome dash of humour thrown in. In fact, it follows Duke Nukem 2's plot pretty much beat for beat, and even the opening stage is similar in setting, but that's when the similarities end between the two. Sadly, this impressive aesthetic facade starts to crack like an economy crockery set in no time at all. In fact, the first few seconds of this level are quite indicative of the troubles that plague the entire game. The very first enemy you face is this guy, a robot on treads. Naturally, you duck, imagining that will be enough to avoid his fire. It's not, of course, and Duke ends up taking a shot straight to his chiselled chin. This is not a title that makes avoiding enemy fire easy. In fact, it makes things a huge pain, literally and figuratively. Some enemies rush on screen, making it hard not to get hit by them. Some explode when they die, which hurts you. Stuff like that is always a delight, and avoiding bullets by jumping over them is as awkward as it sounds. Meaning this is less a run and gun than a edge slowly forward and occasionally gun. It's a real shame too, as the cast of enemies here is impressive. There's small hopping beasts that seem cute at first, alien soldiers that duck and roll around you, slimes that you have to rock the D-pad to get off you, and whatever these are. Sadly, any fun you might have offing them, and I can't deny they do explode in a hugely satisfying manner, is tempered by the fact that they will almost always get a hit in on you before they go down. As a result, you never feel like an unstoppable killing machine, just a big target with an even bigger health bar. I'm not just bad at the game either, by the way. I've watched videos of others playing it and the same thing happens. Even the demo that comes up when you don't press anything on the title screen shows Duke getting his behind handed to him. It's poor design, pure and simple, with a large health meter and plentiful pickups acting as plasters to help cover it up. Still, this is where the level design would come in to save the day somewhat. And to the game's credit, it almost does. The stages are not linear, but instead have you exploring up, down, right and left in order to progress. Usually you have to find a keycard to get through an electric fence, which you can often find by following these cables, which is a helpful added touch. This exploration element does admittedly have drawbacks, with one being that some of the environments are so bland it's hard to tell where you have and haven't been, but there's one issue that really punctures any joy this setup might have offered. Respawning enemies. Yes, respawning enemies. Turn your back for a few moments and the alien slime you obliterated has returned from the grave, and seemingly no worse for wear. This game has more fake deaths than a stage rendition of Titus Andronicus. Now in a linear platformer this wouldn't be too much of a problem, but in a game that actively asks you to check out every nook and cranny, this is a disastrous and completely baffling design decision. It means you no longer want to explore, but instead are just keen to get to the end of a level as quickly as possible without losing a life. and unless you're a speedrunner, there's not much fun to be had from playing that way. So with all these problems in mind, there's only one way to really squeeze any fun out of the game, and that's to play it on easy mode. Which, as we all know, makes you feel like a baby. But it's necessary if you want to avoid an anger-induced migraine. In this mode, enemies take less hits to kill, meaning some of those almost unavoidable attacks are less frequent, so you at least have a fighting chance. It's still largely unsatisfying to play, of course. You never feel like you're beating the game properly, but instead stumbling through it. But your only alternative is to get an almost constant pummeling in the medium or hard modes. It's a shame to admit it, as I loved this game when I was a kid. But it's an experience that's pretty much broken. That's without taking into account the many leaps of faith, jumps that can require pixel precision, and the fact that you take damage if you fall down almost any distance. Through my younger eyes, I only looked at what was good, such as how impressive Duke's skill set is. He can jump like he's on the moon, duck, shoot from ladders, cling from ledges. He even has a fair few amusing death animations. There's a solid range of weapons to use too, from rocket launchers to freeze guns. There are even a few bosses and vehicle-based levels to help break things up. Sadly, even these sections can be irritating. This side-scrolling shooter part seems to require you to have psychic powers in order for you to know whether you can get through a building at the top or bottom, and some bosses can be easier to just wail on and take their fire, rather than devise any specific tactics for taking them down. That does fit in with the rest of the game's ethos though. Duke Nukem on a Game Boy Color is a title with seemingly solid foundations, but what's built on top of them is all over the shop. The developer's heart was clearly in the right place, but the execution is severely lacking. If you're looking for a 2D Duke game, I'd even say the maligned Manhattan Project is a better bet, and that really is a sad state of affairs. You can even download Duke Nukem 1 and 2 on Good Old Games for mere pennies nowadays as well. But if you're looking to play Duke on the go, then there's only one sensible option, aside from the Megaton Edition that's just been released of course, and that's Duke Nukem Advance. This is a surprisingly solid and fun first-person shooter, and allowed Taurus Games to atone for this Game Boy Color iteration it created. But the less said about Duke Nukem Critical Mass on the DS, the better. Created by Apogee, it suffered from a torturous development, and it shows. Overall, Duke Nukem on the Game Boy Color is a bit of an oddity, and not one that's easy to recommend. The Game Boy Color is not short on solid platformers after all. For die-hard Duke fans, and there aren't many of those around nowadays, it might be worth looking into for curiosity value, but there's not much here to enjoy beyond the aesthetics. Come get some? I'd rather not. Hey, thanks for watching. I create at least 2 new videos every month, so do consider subscribing if you want to know when new content is released. Please do give this video a like if you can as well, and you can even watch some of my other videos using the links here. You can now even follow me on Twitter and like the channel on Facebook, if you want. Strangely, for a Game Boy title, the box has a plastic inlay too. What's up with that?
I'm here to avenge all the innocent people you've hurt.